Welcome to our devotion for reading through the Bible in a year in the one-year Bible. And today on October 25th, we're going to look at our Old Testament reading from Jeremiah. The reading, is from Jeremiah chapter 48, verse 1 through 49, verse 22. In today's reading, then, Jeremiah continues to pronounce the Lord's judgments against the nations. Up first is Moab. So we'll especially look at Moab. That is really chapter 48. Chapter 49 is quite similar. It deals with the Ammonites and other nations too. The Ammonites in particular are very similar to Moab in how they're dealt with. Some of the other nations aren't so fortunate as Ammon and Moab, which might not seem to be the case at first, but you'll see what I mean when we get there. Because there is hope that is held out for Moab and then also Ammon. Well, the history of Moab isn't terribly well known. It's hard to pinpoint exact events like when we were talking about yesterday's judgments that were pronounced against Judah. However, there's an interesting thing in that as we're going through these poetic sections of judgment, a lot of place names are mentioned. So it does give us a little leg up on the geography of the region. So I'll talk about that a little bit. Moab was on the eastern side of the Dead Sea, with the Zered River on the south and the Arnon River on the north. And of course, on the east was the desert. Although the area, this land, was occupied by Reuben and Gad after the conquest, by the time of the mid-9th century, Moab had regained control. One interesting feature of our text is that as we look at these place names, we can kind of get a little smorgasbord of some of these places. So Nebo was a city that Reuben had that became a city of Moab. The city of Kiriathaim also was the same. Heshbon was the capital of the Ammonite king Sihon. And at first, the tribe of Reuben came to occupy it, but later belonged to the tribe of Gad. Maybe you noticed this as you were reading through. There's a place called Mad Men. It sounds like the English word for crazy people, but it's actually another town. It might be a play on words on the town Demon, D-I-M-O-N, or it might actually be the correct reading. If that is the case, then it could be identified with modern day Khirbet Dimna, as it's called. Horonaim was probably on the southern end of the Dead Sea geographically. As we're looking at the situation here, this poem refers to the cries from the mountainous regions, or the plateau to be more precise, reaching down to the Dead Sea, which was 2,000 feet below the plateau of Moab. In verse 7, we see that Moab trusted in her works and her wealth. Also could refer to her strongholds. In the end, these things offered no protection, and her false god, Chemosh, and his priests weren't any help either. This religion, you might remember, was infamous for its practice of child sacrifice. Now, some of the things might sound strange, like sowing cities with salt as a sign of their destruction, but this was actually well known in the ancient Near East. The second part of the poem, beginning with verse 11, refers to the complacency of Moab. This is because they never suffered exile like Judah. This has to do with Moab's location outside of the normal trade routes, so most of the invading armies left it undisturbed. Like fine wine, Moab had been allowed to age unhindered. In fact, Moab was indeed well known for its vineyards. Again, this complacency would do them no good. In the third part of the poem, the judgment starts to get more specific as the catastrophe to befall their cities is spelled out. The imagery of drunkenness is used. In fact, it's very graphic in its depiction of it. Once Moab had laughed at Israel as Israel drank the cup. Again, this is a common figure in the ancient Near East. Once as Israel drank the cup of the Lord's wrath, now the tables are turned as Moab is feeling the wrath of God. In the fourth part, Jeremiah piles up quite a thesaurus entry of words to describe Moab's pride. All that Moab cherished was about to perish: her religion, her achievement, her material wealth. The flute of verse 36 that plays a sad song for Moab was a reed pipe, which could express both joy and sorrow quite well. All is gloom and doom and lamentation for Moab under the terrible wrath of God. Yet, remarkably, in 48:47, the Lord declares, I will restore the fortunes of Moab in the latter days. It's pretty obvious that we can apply this whole section to the danger of trusting in our own works in the area of salvation, especially when the gospel is such a powerful word of comfort from the Lord. Like Moab, we could never save ourselves. We could never be good enough. And we ought to rightly lament over our own sin. But praise be to God for the wonder of the gospel, which offers and gives us forgiveness and hope, the restoration that is spoken of even after all the judgments that had been pronounced against Moab. Like I said, we see that Ammon is also offered this hope of a reversal of fortunes, as it were, but Edom and the others don't have quite the hope held out to them. If you remember, both Moab and Ammon go back to Lot in the Old Testament. Well, there you have it. May God be with you and bless you, and we'll look forward to talking with you again very soon.